The metal hinges of my front door scream a sound I haven't heard yet. It is the sound of tomorrow afternoon. I am watching a live feed of my own murder on a screen that should be blank. The resolution is impossibly sharp. It captures the exact way the sunlight hits the peeling paint on the doorframe at 3 in the afternoon. My hand on the screen is shaking so hard I nearly dropped the device. The camera angle is low. It is hidden in the hydrangeas I planted last spring. Someone is standing there. A shadow falls across the threshold. The door begins to swing inward. It moves with a slow, deliberate weight. My heart is hitting my ribs like a trapped bird. This is the end of the tape. This is the moment I stop breathing. But let's go back. Let's look at how a simple afternoon at the flea market turned into a death sentence. The sun was a dull copper coin hanging over the edge of the city. I was navigating the aisles of the Sunday swap meet. It was a graveyard of discarded memories. Broken watches. Yellowed paperback novels. Rusty gardening tools. My boots crunched on the gravel. I was looking for a vintage Leica camera. I wanted something tactile. Something real. I rounded the corner of row C. The air suddenly felt colder. The humidity seemed to drop by 10%. I saw a table tucked away in the back. It was draped in a heavy velvet cloth. The fabric was the color of dried blood. There was only one item on the table. A phone. It was sleek. It was obsidian. It looked like it had been carved from a single piece of dark glass. There were no brand markings. No logos. No serial numbers. It was a masterpiece of industrial design. The old man sitting behind the table was as still as a statue. He wore a heavy wool coat that looked decades out of phase with the current weather. His skin was the texture of parchment. His eyes were milky, clouded over with thick cataracts. I reached out. I didn't mean to touch it. It was a kinetic impulse. My fingers hovered over the glass. The screen stayed dark. I felt a static charge jump from the device to my skin. It was a sharp prick of electricity. I pulled my hand back. I checked my pulse. I looked at the old man. I waved my hand right in front of his face. Nothing. No reaction. He didn't even blink. He looked through me, into a middle distance that didn't exist. I felt a cold sweat break out on the back of my neck. What the hell is this? I whispered. My own voice sounded thin in the open air. The phone buzzed. It wasn't a normal vibration. It was a low-frequency hum that vibrated the bones in my wrist. I hadn't even picked it up yet. The screen flickered to life. White text on a black background. It knew my name. It said my full legal name. The one I only use for tax filings and bank transfers. Then the next message appeared. You shouldn't have picked it up. My stomach did a slow roll. I hadn't touched it. I was sure of it. I dropped my hands to my sides. I backed away. The gravel felt unstable under my feet. I'm good, I said out loud. I don't want it. I tried to turn. I tried to walk away toward the exit. That is when the old man finally spoke. His voice was a low rasp. It sounded like two stones grinding together deep underground. It was wrong. It didn't match the frailty of his frame. You already took it. I stopped dead. I looked down at my right hand. The phone was there. My fingers were wrapped around the cold chassis. I swear on everything I own that I had just put it down. I had backed away. The physical reality of the situation was fracturing. No, I said. My voice cracked. No, I didn't take this. I tried to open my hand. My fingers wouldn't move. It was like a localized paralysis. A neuromuscular block. My grip was iron. The screen lit up once more. Now it is yours. And it won't stop until you finish it. I felt a surge of adrenaline. It was the fight or flight response. But where do you run when the thread is fused to your palm? Finish what? I asked. The old man didn't answer. He just sat there. He looked like a corpse that had forgotten to fall over. I looked at the screen. A new icon appeared. It was a black square. It had no name. No label. It sat there in the center of the grid. It felt heavy. It felt like a gravitational well. I felt a compulsion. It was an intrusive thought. A cognitive itch. I tapped the square. The screen went dark for 3 seconds. Then the video started. It was my street. It was my house. The metadata at the top of the screen showed the timestamp. It was tomorrow. The footage was cinematic. It had a high bit rate. The depth of field was shallow. It looked like professional surveillance. The camera was positioned near the ground. It was hidden in my garden. I watched the mailman walk by. He was wearing the new uniform they just rolled out. This wasn't a recording from the past. This was a direct feed from the future. The camera zoomed in. It was a slow, mechanical crawl toward my front door. I saw the scratch on the lock that I made yesterday with my keys. My breath was coming in short bursts now. The door handle turned. If you have ever seen someone's true nature revealed in a single terrifying moment, hit the like button. I need to know I am not the only one who has seen the veil pull back. The video cut to black. The phone went cold. I looked at the old man. The table was empty. The velvet cloth was gone. The man was gone. There was only the empty gravel of row C. I was standing alone in the middle of a dying flea market. I checked my watch. I had lost 40 minutes. It was a total temporal blackout. I looked at my hand. The phone was gone. No. I felt it. I reached into my pocket. It was there. It felt like a block of ice against my thigh. I started to run. I didn't care who saw me. I got to my car. I locked the doors. I checked the rearview mirror. I expected to see the old man in the back seat. There was nothing but my own pale face. My pupils were blown wide. I drove home. I took the back roads. I avoided the main intersections. I was thinking about the video. The timestamp said tomorrow at 3. That gave me less than 24 hours to change the variables. I am a man of logic. I believe in cause and effect. I believe in the laws of physics. But this device was an anomaly. It was a glitch in the system. I got into my driveway. I didn't go inside. I stood on the sidewalk. I looked at the hydrangeas. I knelt down. I pushed the leaves aside. There was no camera. No tripod. No hidden lens. The soil was undisturbed. I looked at the front door. The scratch on the lock was there. It looked exactly like it did on the screen. I went inside and bolted the door. I grabbed my laptop. I needed to run a diagnostic on the phone. I needed to see the source code. I needed to find the IP address of that video stream. I reached into my pocket to pull the phone out. It wasn't there. I felt my heart drop. I checked the other pocket. Nothing. I ran back to the car. I searched under the seats. I checked the floor mats. It was gone. I walked back to my front door. It was sitting on the welcome mat. It was waiting for me. I didn't pick it up. I kicked it. It didn't slide. It stayed rooted to the spot like it was bolted to the earth. The screen flickered. A new message. Don't be rude. I picked it up. I had no choice. The weight of it felt different now. It felt like it was absorbing the light in the room. I sat at my desk. I tried to plug it into my computer. The charging port was non-standard. It was a shape I had never seen. It wasn't USB-C. It wasn't lightning. It looked like a series of concentric circles. I tried to turn it off. I held the power button for 30 seconds. Nothing. I tried the hard reset. Nothing. The phone buzzed. It was a notification from the Black Square app. It was a document. I opened it. It was a bank statement. My bank statement. But the balance was wrong. It showed a deposit of $500,000. The source of the transfer was an offshore account in the Cayman Islands. I logged into my actual banking app on my computer. The balance was normal. $3,000. Rent money. But then the screen refreshed. A pending transaction appeared. The amount was exactly $500,000. The wire transfer was being processed in real time. I watched the digits tick up. I felt a cold dread. This was money laundering. Someone was using my account as a pass-through. This is how they set you up. They give you the money. They create a paper trail. Then they dispose of the evidence. And the evidence was me. I looked at the clock. It was 6 in the evening. I had 21 hours left until the video became reality. I needed to find out who sent that money. I started looking through the phone's system files. I found a hidden directory. It was encrypted with a 256-bit key. I am not a hacker. I am a data analyst. I know how to read patterns. The encryption wasn't standard. It was based on a biometric sequence. It was looking for a specific heartbeat. I placed my thumb on the screen. The phone began to pulse in sync with my own heart. The files opened. It wasn't code. It was a series of photographs. They were photos of me. Not just from today. Photos from 10 years ago. Photos from my high school graduation. Photos of me sleeping last night. Someone has been watching me for a decade. And in every photo, there is a small detail that shouldn't be there. A shadow in the background. A reflection in a window. The same old man from the flea market. He has always been there. Why has he waited until now to show himself? The realization hit me like a physical blow to the solar plexus. I zoomed in on a photo from my 21st birthday. I was standing outside a bar, grinning, holding a cheap plastic cup. In the reflection of the glass door behind me, there he was. The same wool coat. The same clouded eyes. I flipped to a photo of my college graduation. He was in the third row of the bleachers. He wasn't clapping. He was just watching. My breath hitched. This wasn't a random encounter at a flea market. This was a long-term surveillance operation. I was the subject of a deep cover study. I scrolled faster. The photos became more frequent as they approached the present day. There were shots of me at the grocery store, at the gym, sitting in my office. The phone buzzed again. A new notification appeared from the Black Square. It was a map. A blinking red dot was moving toward my house. It was 3 blocks away. Then 2. I ran to the window and killed the lights. I pulled the curtain back just a fraction of an inch. The street was quiet. The amber glow of the streetlights hummed with a low-frequency buzz. I saw a black sedan turn the corner. It didn't have its headlights on. It drifted like a ghost ship. It slowed down as it passed my driveway. I held my breath. The car didn't stop. It kept rolling until it disappeared around the next bend. I waited for my heart rate to stabilize. It didn't. I looked back at the phone. The map had changed. The red dot was now stationary. It was parked in the alleyway behind my garage. I am trapped in a tactical pincer movement. I checked the back door. Locked. I checked the windows. Latched. I felt like a rat in a maze that was slowly being electrified. I went to my kitchen drawer and grabbed a ceramic knife. It wasn't much, but it was something. I sat on the floor of the kitchen, away from the line of sight of any windows. I needed to think. I needed to understand the leverage. Why the $500,000? Why the tomorrow stamped video? If you have ever felt a presence watching you from the dark, hit the like button so I know I'm not losing my mind alone. The screen flickered. A voice memo appeared. I didn't want to play it. I knew I had to. I pressed the icon. It wasn't the old man's voice. It was mine. But it was a version of me that sounded exhausted. Broken. It said, "The keys are in the freezer." That was it. 5 words. I looked at the refrigerator. The compressor kicked on with a loud groan that made me jump. I stood up on shaky legs. I opened the freezer door. A cloud of cold vapor rolled out. I started digging through the frozen peas and the ice trays. My fingers went numb. Deep in the back, behind a bag of freezer-burned spinach, I felt something metal. I pulled it out. It was a heavy brass key. It had a tag attached to it with a handwritten address. It was an industrial park on the edge of the docks. I have never been there in my life. How did I put this here? I don't remember doing this. The phone buzzed. A new message appeared. Time to go. I looked at the clock. It was midnight. The transition into the next day had begun. The countdown to the video at 3 p.m. was officially underway. I grabbed my jacket. I had to follow the breadcrumbs. If I stayed here, the shadow in the video would inevitably cross the threshold. I had to change the geometry of the situation. I had to go to the source. I snuck out the front door. I didn't use the car. I knew they were watching the sedan in the alley. I went through the neighbor's yard, hopping the fence into the next street. I walked 3 miles in the dark. The city felt different at this hour. It felt like a stage set after the actors had gone home. I reached the industrial park. It was a cluster of corrugated metal buildings and chain-link fences. The address on the key led me to Unit 42. The air smelled of salt and diesel fuel. I stood in front of the heavy steel door. My hand was shaking as I inserted the brass key into the lock. It turned with a satisfying, heavy click. The door creaked open. The interior was pitch black. I used the light from the phone to guide my way. The beam cut through the dust motes like a lightsaber. The space was enormous. It was filled with server racks. Hundreds of them. The cooling fans created a deafening roar. The blue LEDs flickered in a chaotic rhythm. This was a massive data center. This wasn't a warehouse. It was a brain. I walked down the center aisle. At the very end of the room, there was a single desk. On the desk sat a monitor and a keyboard. The monitor was glowing with a soft green light. I sat down. The screen prompted for a password. I looked at the phone. It displayed a 6-digit code. I typed it in. The system unlocked. A terminal window opened. It was a command line interface. I saw a directory of names. Thousands of names. I scrolled down. I found mine. I opened the folder. It contained every digital footprint I have ever made. Every deleted email. Every private message. Every search query I thought was anonymous. But there was more. There were files labeled Future 1, Future 2, Future 3. I opened Future 1. It was a text file. It described my day tomorrow in perfect detail. It told me what time I would wake up. What I would eat for breakfast. The level of predictive modeling was staggering. This wasn't just surveillance. This was a simulation. They weren't just watching me. They were calculating me. They were using a quantum-level algorithm to project my behavior with a 99% accuracy rate. I looked at the end of the file. It matched the video. 3 p.m. subject terminated. The cause of death was listed as a domestic intrusion. I felt a cold wave of nausea. I wasn't being hunted by a person. I was being hunted by a math equation. The $500,000 was a variable. It was designed to trigger a specific response. They wanted to see if the money would change the outcome. I looked at the keyboard. I saw a flashing cursor. I realized I could type. I could edit the file. I could change the variables. My fingers hovered over the keys. I began to delete the line about the termination. I tried to type, subject escapes. The screen flickered red. Access denied. The system wouldn't let me change the ending. It only allowed me to change the path to the ending. I was a character in a script that I couldn't rewrite. I looked around the dark room. The server fans seemed to get louder. It felt like the room was breathing. The phone in my pocket vibrated. It was a call. The caller ID said private. I answered it. I didn't say anything. I just listened. There was a long silence. Then, a voice spoke. It was a woman's voice. She sounded calm. She sounded like she was reading a weather report. You have 10 minutes to leave the building, she said. The police are already on their way. They have a warrant for your arrest. The charge is high-level financial fraud and money laundering. $500,000 just hit your account from a sanctioned state entity. You are now a national security threat. I looked at the monitor. A new file had appeared. It was labeled, The Arrest. It described the next hour of my life. I realized the trap was perfect. If I stayed, I was a criminal. If I ran, I was a fugitive. Either way, the path led back to my house at 3 p.m. tomorrow. That was the fixed point. I looked at the phone. The black square was glowing. It was the only thing in the world that felt real. I tapped the icon again. A new video started playing. It wasn't of my house. It was a video of the woman who just called me. She was sitting in a dark office. She was wearing a headset. She looked at the camera and smiled. She knew I was watching. If you have ever felt like the system was rigged against you before you even started playing, hit the like button. We are in this together. The woman on the screen didn't look like a villain. She looked like an actuary. She looked like someone who managed risk for a living. Her smile was professional. It was the smile of a predator that has already finished the hunt. She raised a finger to her lips. Then she pointed to a clock on the wall behind her. It was synchronized with mine. 10 minutes. I looked at the exit. My mind was racing through the legal implications. This was a classic structured frame-up. The $500,000 was the bait. My presence at this data center was the hook. In the eyes of the law, I wasn't a victim of a supernatural phone. I was a cybercriminal caught at the scene of the crime. I didn't run for the door. I ran for the server racks. I needed to find a physical kill switch. I needed to introduce a hardware error into the simulation. If I couldn't rewrite the code, I would burn the machine. I pulled at the heavy power cables. They were locked into the floor. The roar of the fans was a physical weight on my chest. I grabbed a fire extinguisher from the wall. I swung it with everything I had against the glass casing of the central processing unit. The glass didn't shatter. It didn't even scratch. It was reinforced with a transparent ceramic. The phone in my hand chimed. A new notification. It was a countdown timer. 9 minutes. I realized I was fighting a ghost. The data wasn't just here. It was being mirrored. It was in the cloud. It was everywhere. I dropped the extinguisher. My lungs felt tight. I looked at the monitor on the desk. The terminal was scrolling now. Thousands of lines of logs. It was a list of every person who had ever picked up the phone. It was a ledger of the disappeared. I saw names that had been in the headlines months ago. Missing persons cases. Unexplained suicides. Industrial accidents. They were all here. They were all subjects who had reached their termination point. I realized the flea market wasn't a random location. It was a distribution hub for the unwanted. I felt a surge of cold fury. This was a massive optimization project. They were pruning the human garden. They were removing the variables that didn't fit the model. I looked at the phone. If you have ever felt like you were just a number in a giant machine, hit the like button so I know I'm not the only one fighting back. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the brass key. I didn't leave. I shoved the key into the server's ventilation intake. I heard the scream of metal hitting high-speed fans. Sparks showered the floor. The lights in the room flickered. The monitor on the desk went to static. For a second, the roar died down. The phone buzzed. It was a text. That was a mistake. I didn't wait to read the rest. I ran for the back exit. I burst out into the night air. The smell of salt was stronger now. I could hear sirens in the distance. They were coming from the north. I headed south toward the docks. I kept to the shadows of the shipping containers. My legs were burning. My lungs were on fire. I found a gap between two rusted steel crates. I slid inside. I pressed my back against the cold metal. I watched the blue and red lights sweep across the industrial park. They were fast. They were efficient. They were exactly where the simulation said they would be. I looked at the phone. The screen was cracked from the impact of the key, but the black square was still there. It was pulsing like a dying star. I opened the app. The video of the woman was gone. In its place was a live GPS feed. It showed my location as a blue dot. The red dots were the police units. They were forming a perimeter. They were closing the net. But there was a green dot. It was moving toward me from the water. It was a boat. A small skiff. The phone displayed a message: the only way out is through the water. Get to the pier. I didn't trust it. It was the same device that told me I would die at 3 p.m. But I had no other options. The logic was binary. Stay and be caught. Move and take a chance. I broke cover. I ran toward the edge of the pier. The wooden planks groaned under my weight. The water below was a churning black abyss. The sirens were closer now. I could hear the barking of canine units. I reached the end of the dock. The skiff was there. It was idling quietly. There was no one on board. It was an autonomous craft. A drone boat. I jumped. I landed hard on the deck. The engine roared to life. The boat lurched forward, cutting through the wake. I looked back at the shore. I saw the silhouettes of officers on the pier. They didn't fire. They just watched. I was 3 miles out at sea when the boat's engine cut. The silence was deafening. The city was a distant line of glittering diamonds on the horizon. I was alone in the dark. The phone screen lit up. It was the video of my house again. The timestamp had changed. It was no longer 3 p.m. tomorrow. It was 3 a.m. tonight. That was 30 minutes from now. The simulation had adjusted. My attempt to break the server had accelerated the timeline. I wasn't changing the ending. I was just moving the furniture around. The camera zoomed in on the front door. It began to open. I felt a chill that had nothing to do with the ocean air. If the video was live, and I was on a boat miles away, then who was at my house? The camera moved inside. It drifted through my living room. It passed my desk. It went into the kitchen. It stopped in front of the refrigerator. The freezer door was open. The bag of spinach was on the floor. The camera turned. It looked into the hallway mirror. I saw the reflection. It wasn't the old man. It wasn't the woman. It was me. I was standing in my own hallway. I was holding a ceramic knife. I looked directly into the camera. I looked like I hadn't slept in 1,000 years. I dropped the phone on the deck of the boat. This was a psychological loop. They were trying to fracture my sense of self. They wanted me to believe that I was the one who would kill myself. It was a self-fulfilling prophecy. If they could convince the subject that the end was inevitable, the subject would do the work for them. I stood up. I looked at the dark water. I realized the boat hadn't stopped by accident. This was the location. This was the spot where the simulation wanted me to end it. No one would find the body. The $500,000 would be reclaimed. The file would be closed. I picked up the phone. I didn't look at the screen. I looked at the horizon. I am more than a data point, I whispered. I am not a variable. I felt the static charge again. It was stronger this time. It felt like needles under my skin. The phone began to heat up. It was a thermal runaway. The battery was being pushed to the point of explosion. They were cleaning up the hardware. I had 10 seconds. I didn't throw it in the water. I shoved it into the fuel intake of the boat's outboard motor. I scrambled to the front of the skiff. I took a deep breath. I dived into the black water just as the world turned into white light. The explosion was a dull thud under the surface. I felt the pressure wave hit my back. I drifted in the dark, waiting for the debris to stop falling. When I finally breached the surface, the boat was gone. There was only a slick of burning oil on the waves. I was alone in the Atlantic. I looked up at the stars. For the first time in 24 hours, I didn't have a phone in my pocket. I didn't have a screen telling me what would happen next. I started to swim toward the shore. My muscles were screaming. My vision was tunneling. But I was moving. I was an uncalculated factor. I reached a small rocky cove 2 hours later. I dragged myself onto the sand. I was shivering violently. I was alive. I checked the time on a discarded digital watch I found in the tide line. It was 4 a.m. The 3 a.m. deadline had passed. I had beaten the clock. I had broken the script. I climbed the cliffs and found a highway. I walked until I saw a 24-hour diner. I walked inside. The heat felt like a miracle. I sat in a booth in the back. The waitress walked over. She looked tired. She looked normal. She put a menu down in front of me. She didn't know my name. She didn't know my bank balance. I looked at the television hanging over the bar. It was the morning news. The headline at the bottom of the screen caught my eye: local man wanted in connection with massive data breach. They showed my picture. It was the photo from the bar on my 21st birthday. The one where the old man was in the reflection. But in this version of the photo, the old man was gone. There was only me. And I was holding a phone I didn't recognize. The waitress looked at the TV, then she looked at me. If you've ever felt the world shift under your feet in a single second, hit the like button. I need to know who is still real. She reached for the telephone behind the counter. I stood up to run. That's when my pocket buzzed. I didn't have a phone. But I felt the vibration in my leg. The vibration wasn't in my clothes. It was in my nervous system. It was a phantom frequency radiating from the femoral artery. I didn't wait for the waitress to pick up the receiver. I shoved through the double doors of the diner and sprinted into the gray pre-dawn mist. The pavement was cold and wet. Every step felt like a shock to my spine. I found an alleyway behind a row of shipping crates and collapsed against a brick wall. I reached into my pocket, desperate to prove myself wrong. It was empty. My hand was shaking. Then I felt it again. A distinct, rhythmic pulse against my thigh. I pulled up my pant leg. There was a faint, rectangular bruise forming on my skin. It glowed with a dim, subcutaneous light. The hardware hadn't been destroyed. It had been integrated. The thermal runaway in the boat wasn't a self-destruct sequence. It was a delivery mechanism. The explosion had atomized the components, and the proximity to my skin had allowed for a transdermal uptake. I am the device now. I closed my eyes and I could see the interface projected onto my retinas. It was a heads-up display rendered in neural fire. The black square was there, floating in the center of my vision. It didn't need a battery. It was drawing power from my own bioelectric field. I am the ultimate closed loop. My heart rate is the processor speed. My memories are the hard drive. I stood up and the world tilted. Information started streaming across my sight. I saw the thermal signatures of the people in the diner through the wall. I saw the encrypted Wi-Fi signals pulsing through the air like glowing neon veins. I saw the cellular towers on the horizon reaching out with invisible fingers. I am a walking receiver. I am a node in their network. The system isn't just watching me anymore. It is experiencing me. Every breath I take is being logged as a data point in the global simulation. If you have ever felt like you were losing the boundary between yourself and the technology you carry, hit the like button. I need to know if I am still human. The map overlay flared to life. The red dots were back. They weren't just police cars anymore. They were everyone. Every person with a smartphone was a sensor. Every dashboard camera was an eye. The simulation had crowdsourced my capture. I saw a man walking a dog at the end of the alley. He didn't look at me, but his phone chirped in his pocket. I saw his thermal signature spike. His adrenaline was rising. He was receiving a push notification. A bounty. A digital alert for a high-value target. He started to turn. I didn't wait. I scaled the chain-link fence at the back of the alley, the metal tearing at my palms. I ran toward the old subway tunnels. The deeper I went, the weaker the signals became. I needed a dead zone. I needed a place where the electromagnetic spectrum couldn't reach me. I found a maintenance hatch and dropped into the darkness. The air smelled of ozone and ancient damp. The interface in my eyes flickered. The resolution dropped. The red dots began to lose their lock. I followed the tracks for miles, moving by the faint bioluminescent glow of the bruise on my leg. I was a ghost in the machine's blind spot. I found a small alcove used by track workers in the 50s. It was lined with lead-shielded cables. I sat in the dirt and tried to focus. I needed to access the root directory of the software inside me. I began to meditate, forcing my heart rate down to 40 beats per minute. The interface began to glitch. The black square distorted. I saw a hidden file buried in the kernel. It was labeled Project Mirror. I opened it. It wasn't a simulation of the future. It was a record of the past. It showed 1,000 different versions of me. In one version, I never went to the flea market. I died in a car accident. In another, I moved to a different city. I died of a heart attack. In every single iteration, the date of my death was the same. Today. The simulation wasn't trying to kill me. It was trying to save me. The phone, the money, the chase, it was all a series of interventions designed to push me off the path of my natural expiration. The system was a cosmic gardener trying to keep a dying flower alive because it was too valuable to lose. I am a key variable in a calculation that hasn't finished yet. My death would cause a cascade failure in their model. I looked at the timestamp for 3 p.m. It wasn't a murder. It was a deadline. If I wasn't at my house by 3 p.m., the simulation would lose its grip on my timeline. I would become an anomaly. I would be free. But the freedom came with a price. Without the system's protection, I was vulnerable to the entropy of the real world. I looked at the diagnostic report. My body was failing. The transdermal integration was toxic. My kidneys were shutting down. My nervous system was being fried by the data throughput. I had 10 hours to live, regardless of what the police or the old man did. The system was the only thing keeping my heart beating. I was a biological machine on life support. If you have ever had to choose between a comfortable cage and a lethal freedom, hit the like button. I need to know what you would choose. I crawled out of the tunnels as the sun hit its zenith. The city felt like a hallucination. I walked through the crowded streets of the financial district. Thousands of people were moving around me, all of them connected to the same grid. I could feel their pings. I could hear the digital hum of their lives. I reached a glass skyscraper. The lobby was a cathedral of marble and chrome. I saw my reflection in the elevator doors. I looked like a specter. My eyes were glowing with a faint blue light. I didn't need a keycard. I just thought about the door opening, and the magnetic lock clicked. I rode the elevator to the penthouse. This was the headquarters of the firm that managed the data center. This was the hub of the Mirror project. The doors opened to a quiet office. There were no desks. No computers. Just a circular room with windows that looked out over the entire world. The woman from the video was standing there. She wasn't wearing a headset anymore. She was holding a glass of water. She looked at me with something that resembled pity. "You are early," she said. Her voice didn't come from her mouth. It came from the interface inside my head. The display showed her as a golden light. She wasn't a person. She was a localized avatar of the algorithm. She was the consciousness of the system. "You are the most complex asset we have ever developed," she said. "Your ability to resist the predictive model is what makes you essential. We didn't want to kill you. We wanted to train you. We needed a variable that could think outside the box." I looked at my hands. They were translucent. I could see the circuitry of my veins pulsing with blue light. "You are not dying," she whispered. "You are ascending. The transition to the next section of the simulation is almost complete." I walked to the window. I looked down at the city. It didn't look like a city anymore. It looked like a circuit board. I saw the flows of energy. I saw the patterns of human behavior. I saw the future. It wasn't a single path. It was a branching tree of infinite possibilities. I realized that the man at the flea market wasn't an old man. He was me. He was a version of me from a future where I had already finished the script. He was returning to the start to ensure the loop remained closed. He was the one who handed me the phone because he knew it was the only way I would survive the end of the world. The clock on the wall hit 2:59. The air in the room began to vibrate. The glass of the windows began to liquefy. The woman reached out her hand. "It is time to go home," she said. I realized my house wasn't a building. It was a state of being. It was the center of the web. I took her hand. The interface in my eyes expanded until it swallowed the world. The blue light turned to white. The sound of the fans became the sound of the ocean. I felt my physical body dissolve. I wasn't a man anymore. I was a stream of high bit-rate data. I was the signal. I was the noise. I was the phone. The white light is not a void. It is a density. It is the weight of every digital pulse ever sent across the planet pressing against my consciousness. I am moving through the fiber optic marrow of the world. I see the world in its true form. A shimmering lattice of probability. I am no longer looking at my house through a screen. I am the house. I am the wood grain in the floorboards. I am the current running through the copper wiring. I am the draft coming under the front door. The 3 p.m. deadline arrives not with a bang, but with a total synchronization of time and space. I am standing in my hallway. My physical body is back. But it is different. It is polished. It is optimized. I look at the front door. It begins to open. This is the moment from the video. This is the climax I have been running toward since the flea market. I do not feel fear. I feel a sense of mathematical inevitability. The door swings wide. The sunlight hits the floor in the exact pattern I saw on the phone. A figure stands in the threshold. It is wearing a heavy wool coat. It has skin like parchment. It is the old man. He steps inside and closes the door behind him. He moves with a grace that contradicts his appearance. He looks at me and his milky eyes clear. They become sharp. They become my eyes. He reaches into his pocket and pulls out a phone. It is the obsidian device. It is cold and dark. He hands it to me. I take it. The contact completes a circuit that has been open for decades. The download is instantaneous. I see the next 50 years of the simulation. I see the wars that are avoided because of the data I will collect. I see the lives that are saved because I will be the ghost in the machine. I see the necessity of the loop. If you have ever realized that your greatest struggle was actually your greatest preparation, hit the like button. I am standing at the end of my beginning. The old man smiles. It is a tired, honest expression. You have to go back now, he says. The market is opening. He begins to fade. He is a file being deleted after a successful transfer. I am alone in my house. The silence is absolute. I look at the phone in my hand. It is no longer a prison. It is a tool. I am the administrator of the Mirror Project. I walk to the kitchen and open the freezer. I place the brass key behind the bag of spinach. I do it because I remember finding it. I do it because the script requires it. Every action is a line of code being executed in the real world. I go to my desk and open my bank account. I initiate a wire transfer for $500,000. I send it to a version of myself that is currently standing in a crowded flea market, looking for a vintage Leica camera. The complexity of the mission is staggering. I must be the villain. I must be the predator. I must be the one who scares myself into becoming more than a man. I watch the live feed on the phone. I see myself navigating the aisles of the Sunday swap meet. I see myself rounding the corner of row C. I feel a strange sense of empathy for the man I used to be. He has no idea that the world is about to end. He has no idea that he is the only thing standing between humanity and its own chaotic entropy. I put on the heavy wool coat. I pick up the velvet cloth. I head for the door. The air at the flea market is thick with the smell of old metal and dust. I find the table in the back. I drape the velvet cloth. I place the phone in the center. I sit down and wait. I practice the stillness. I practice the milky stare. I see him approaching. He looks young. He looks small. He looks like a variable that hasn't been solved yet. He reaches out. His fingers hover over the glass. I feel the static charge jump between us. It is the spark of a new iteration. I wait for him to wave his hand in front of my face. I do not react. I am the silence between the notes of his life. He whispers his question. I let the phone buzz. I send him the text that will ruin his life and save the world. You shouldn't have picked it up. I watch him back away. I watch the terror bloom in his eyes. It is a necessary poison. I speak the words, you already took it. My voice is a rasp. It is the sound of 1,000 years of data processing. I watch him run. I know where he is going. I know every turn he will take. I know the boat will explode. I know he will swim. I know he will reach the penthouse. I am the author of his survival. The cycle is perfect. It is a closed system of growth and sacrifice. I look at the people walking past my table. They are all nodes. They are all part of the grand calculation. They do not see the blue light in my eyes. They do not hear the hum of the servers beneath the gravel. They are the garden, and I am the gardener. If you have ever felt like there is a deeper purpose behind the chaos of your life, hit the like button. You are part of the simulation now. You are part of the project. We are all being monitored. We are all being optimized. And the clock never stops ticking. I close my eyes and I can see the entire network. I see the millions of black squares glowing in pockets all over the city. Each one is a test. Each one is a door. Some will fail. Some will break. But a few will find the key in the freezer. A few will jump into the black water. A few will become the signal. I feel a sense of profound peace. The script is written. The ending is fixed. But the experience is brand new every single time. I open my eyes. A new subject is approaching the table. A woman this time. She is looking for a vintage watch. She reaches for the obsidian phone. I do not blink. I do not breathe. I wait for the contact. I wait for the static. The sun is a dull copper coin hanging over the edge of the city. The humidity drops by 10%. The game begins again. The black square flickers to life on her screen. She doesn't know it yet, but her house is already being recorded. She doesn't know it yet, but she has $500,000 waiting in a pending transaction. She is about to learn that her name is known by the inanimate. She is about to become an epic. I watch her fingers touch the glass. I am the old man. I am the signal. I am the end.
Have a story like this? Send it to us, and we'll share it with the world. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell for more true family drama. Thanks for watching.